From the Tulsa World, this is the Newsroom podcast. I'm editor Jason Collington, here to kind of help you with the stories behind the stories at the Tulsa World. I've got Tim Stanley with me today. Tim Stanley is one of our one of the best writers in journalism, if you ask me. We have had him tackle some big projects over the years. And one of the biggest and one of the most popular series he ever did for us is about the very tragic Girl Scout murders that happened in Oklahoma. And he did a series a couple of years ago that kind of, for the first time, really put it all together. And we had some news on that case. It is still officially a cold case, if you will. But Tim broke some news earlier this week about what happened. Tim, kind of catch everyone up if they've not heard what the big news was that just came out.
Okay, yeah, Jason, you bet. The big news this last week was that the authorities made public the results of some DNA testing related to the case, and that the testing that they talked about actually did provide, I think, some significant information. The longtime primary suspect in this case, as anyone who is familiar with it, knows, was the late Gene Leroy Hart, who was actually tried and acquitted, but then died shortly after in prison on unrelated charges. This testing, the results that they've just made public, actually did result in some partial profiles that matched him. While at the same time, they were able to exclude, with these partial profiles, several other suspects who had not been previously excluded. So it's significant. I think we also need to say what it's not. And it's not considered what they would say or call conclusive. In order for there to be conclusive results, or considered conclusive, they would have to have a full DNA profile. And to be clear, they've never had one in this case.
And if you will, Tim, kind of take people out. This was in 1977 when this happened. Tell everyone kind of a summary for those who may not be familiar with this case. Although there's a lot of, it got a lot of publicity at the time. It's continued to get in publicity, but give everyone kind of a summary of kind of what happened and how this suspect kind of got involved.
Sure. Yeah, just real briefly. This was 1977 when these crimes occurred. It was, I think, the first night of summer camp, Camp Scott, for Girl Scouts from Tulsa who were there. And 3 Girl Scouts from Tulsa were murdered that very first night. And they were 8-year-old Lori Farmer, Michelle Gousset, 9 years old, and then 10-year-old Denise Milner. They were found the next morning by one of the counselors, Carla Wilhite, and so that launched a massive investigation. And it was just incredible, heartbreaking news when it began to break in Tulsa. As you might imagine, just a very shocking thing, not anything anybody would ever expect. But from very early in the case, very early on, the primary suspect who emerged was, as we mentioned earlier, Gene Leroy Hart. He was an escaped convicted rapist. He had been at large in that area, in the area of Camp Scott, which is near Locust Grove in Mayes County. He had been at large in that area for about 4 years, living in and around the area of the camp, which was close to where he grew up. He was known to frequent those woods and to be very elusive. Law enforcement had not been able to apprehend him, and so he was on authorities' radar from day one. And then they were able to find some evidence that strongly suggested, that he was in fact involved. This led in turn, and I know it's a long story, but just in a nutshell, it led in turn to a long manhunt and fugitive investigation. They were eventually able to track him down and corner him in a little cabin in the Cookson Hills of Cherokee County. And so he was finally apprehended. He was brought to trial, but ultimately acquitted in this case. A lot of people very shocked by that. And the ripples from it really are continuing to be felt today. But he's always been really the main suspect. And he never testified, never spoke really publicly about it. And then he died. Again, another twist in the case. Just weeks after he was acquitted, he collapsed in prison, McAllister, where he was being held on unrelated charges. But he died of a heart attack, just very suddenly, just weeks after being acquitted. So, it's a case, a story that has twists, it has turns, it has drama and intrigue. And here we are 45 years later, still talking about it, the anniversary coming up. And so, yeah, that's about as, that was lengthy, I guess, but that's about as good a nutshell version as I can give.
And again, 5 years ago, you were asked to kind of write this. Again, like so many things in journalism, we write a story here and a story here and a story here, and we never bring the narrative all together. And so you were asked, I want to say it was the 40th anniversary, wasn't it?
40th, yes.
Yeah. We asked you to kind of write this from beginning to end. And you put together a series that not only was spectacular. I'm a huge Tim Stanley fan, but this was not only incredible reporting, incredible writing, but at the time, 5 years ago, we asked you to voice it and to read this series out loud. And had a whole website that we dedicated to it for the whole series. And you could listen to the story, you could read the story. Again, our great staff photographers had some haunting photos of that place that has been shut down since then. And it was just amazing. And just, what was it, last year, or was it 2 years ago? When did we put that podcast together?
Podcast was early last year. So
early last year. My timelines are still messed up.
Right. Yeah, I'm not familiar with you.
And so early last year, our owners at Lee Enterprises were looking to launch a podcast series that kind of looks at the most, either cold cases, the most notorious crimes that have happened in the 26 states that our 77 properties were at. And so we pitched, of course, ours, because we already had you on tape. We already had the audio version of it. And they picked us to be the first episode of this new podcast. And come to find out, all this time later, it's still the most popular one that's been downloaded in that series. They've done other ones in Omaha and other places. But you really did an incredible job. I took the opportunity to listen to it all again on my travels. And again, it's like you said, a lot of twists, a lot of turns. And so this news coming out, of course, it's somewhat related because you just spent, I want to say it sounded like a whole day, Tim, being interviewed by ABC, because they are going to be releasing a documentary about this case on Hulu. Talk a little bit about what's going on there.
You bet. Four-part documentary series that ABC News has put together that should be coming out. We haven't had the official announcement of it yet, but we expect that any time. But it'll stream on Hulu. I spent, they reached out to me, the ABC News crew, last year when they were planning this, and set aside some time to interview me. And so we did, I spent about 8 hours with them one Saturday there at the Tulsa World Newsroom. And went over a lot of things in very fine and minute detail, and just talking about the case and my own coverage of it. And they moved forward. They've interviewed a lot of people. In fact, they told me, and this was very gratifying for me, that it was our series that really kind of put them onto this as a possible multi-series feature for them. And they told me that everybody who came onto their project team, which was dozens of people, everybody, they first asked them to read our series.
Wow. That's
And
awesome. That's awesome.
that was great to hear. And because you just never know, how far the reach is with a
Yep.
project like that. How far out there
Yep.
are we getting? But clearly, we did have some reach with this. And so, yeah, they. So what happened? As far as this most recent news, one of the interviews that ABC did was with the current sheriff in Mays County. That's Mike Reed. And they talked to him. It's notable because Sheriff Reed has declined in the past, and he's been in office since 2012. He has declined to talk about that case publicly. And just to give you a little context, which he provided to me, and which makes a little more sense of what is going on here as far as this latest news. When he was elected in 2012, I think the Farmer family, that's the parents of one of the victims, Lori Farmer, approached him and asked him to relook at the case, which was a cold case, nothing new with it in a number of years. Previous DNA testing had not really gone anywhere, but he agreed to do that, and he really was doing it just for them. He was doing it for the families. He wanted to get them some answers, and so as part of that, of him relooking at the case, an effort was launched in Mays County, Locust Grove, Pryor, and just some of the other towns in the county to raise money to fund new DNA testing. Privately raised funds to get this done, and how that was done is the sheriff, he went to people there and said, let's do this for these families. Let's try to get them some answers. So I think that's significant and something that's we should underscore, is that this really was citizens. This was the folks there in the county who wanted to get this done. So that did happen. I think OSBI partnered with the sheriff's office, and they prepared the samples. Several $1,000s raised to get these tested through private lab. And so Sheriff Reed, this would have been in 2017, trying to get my timeline straight here, is when they did the fundraising and the testing. They had results in 2019, which obviously that was one of my questions for the sheriff, is you've known this, you've had these results since 2019. So what gives? I mean, why didn't you guys go public with this before now? And so what he said to me was, again, he started out doing this. He wanted to do it for the families. And when he got those results, he went to the families and he said, here's what we got. We didn't get the full profile, which, for most people, that would be the smoking gun. That's still not there. But what they did have, he thought was significant enough to share with the families, to give them some answers. But beyond that, he sort of just left it with the families and didn't seek to make those results public. Again, we're talking partial profiles.
Right.
But since they were doing the ABC News documentary, I think the farmers asked him, since they were participating, if he would share those results publicly, first with ABC, and then he decided, because he was doing that, he needed to just kind of put them out there for everybody. And so that's what happened, and that's why kind of explains the timing. Again, yes, they've known this. This is not necessarily new information, but it has not been released publicly until last week. And it is, to sum it up, it really does make the case against Hart, really. It's just continuing to grow stronger with time. And these latest results, albeit partial profiles, really still, everything points to him. And so that's kind of where it stands. And that kind of explains the timing on that, and the relationship with the ABC News crew and that documentary.
Well, Tim, take me back to this. As I said, but I want to get at the story behind the story here. Take me back to that day that you got assigned this story. What did you know about it? Had you ever heard about it before? What was your assignment? What did they say when your editors came to you and said to do this? Kind of take me back to that moment where you got that assignment and what was going through your head.
I remember I actually pitched it. I was aware that the 40th anniversary, we were about a year out at that point. This would have been 2016. I think Jenny Graham was projects editor at that time. And I remember us having just kind of a round table to talk about bigger projects that reporters could undertake just in the upcoming year. I said, we got the 40th anniversary of this case coming up. It was a huge deal at the time, and it's still, the ripples again are still being felt. There's still some very strong opinions both ways about this case out there in the community and in the state. Why don't we go back and look at this? What if we've got a year, what if we take some time between now and then to just see what we might be able to accomplish as far as a project related to this? So it was a little nebulous at that point. We just knew kind of that we wanted to do something. I thought, a multi-story series of some kind sounded good. And so that's kind of where it started. And then I just started poking around. My goal initially was just, first of all, to find out, because I wanted to bring as many voices into this as possible. Because that's one thing when you go back and you look, it's, we obviously the victims' families, they've spoken out through the years, they've been interviewed. And but there are a lot of other people that were affected by it that it's hard to find anything about them or just interviews with them. And so I wanted to start by getting the families on board first and foremost. Had they not been on board, I would have probably walked away and said, I don't want to do this. But they were on board. And then from there, this started expanding out and seeing who else we could find who might have some angle on the case. And so after I probably within a few weeks of doing some of that cursory, just poking around and a little research, I had decided that I thought we could probably pull off a 5 or 6 story series revisiting the case from beginning and bringing it up to, at that time, the 40th anniversary. And so I just kind of keeping Jenny in the loop. We began to have some meetings with Photo and with them to start planning it out. My initially just as a side note, two of the families participated. One of them, the Gousset family, did not, although I did have a good exchange off the record with Dick Gousset, the dad, that they had stopped doing media many years ago. That was just their family policy. But the other two, the Milner family and the farmers, were on board with it. And the first thing I did, because again, I wanted them to be comfortable with this, and I wanted them to just to trust me, as the kind of be able to put some trust in me as the guy who was going to kind of be spearheading this. So I went and met with each of them individually. I met with Sherry Farmer and Betty Milner at their homes, and we just talked about the case. Again, this was not a formal interview. But like I've told Sherry, I thought, this is your chance, if you want, is to kind of interview me and just kind of get comfortable with me, since you've agreed to kind of let me tell your story. And so we laid some groundwork there that I think paid off as this went forward. I felt like I had some trust with them. And then, we kind of went from there. We began to do some interviews with other people. And a very critical part, I think, and it didn't work out until very late in the process. We got access to Camp Scott. We were able to get in there. I think a sense of setting is very critical with this story. I think. Well,
and it was shut down. I mean, it's not open to the public.
It's not open to the public. No.
And I'm telling you, there were some haunting. Who was the photographer on that?
Jesse Wodarski.
That's right.
Went in with us. We got the current, or the guy who kind of I think manages the lease. It's the property. Part of it is used as a hunting lease now, and the rest of it's not used for anything. But basically, what
haunting.
It's been completely reclaimed by the wilderness. You still have the ruins of some of these camp structures there.
Yeah.
And but it looks like something out of some kind of post-apocalyptic.
It does.
It hasn't been. I mean, obviously, it hadn't been maintained.
Right.
It hadn't been 40 years. They never had another camp there. They shut it down after this. They just couldn't do it. I mean, you can't. I mean, really, if you think about it. But I think getting in there was critical. And Jesse's photography, I always love to give her a shout out. because she did a couple of the family interviews with me too, and a couple of other interviews that she did video on. And I came to really respect her touch and just her eye. And you know, she was great for this. Mike Simons also participated, did some great work. And then John Clanton kind of pulled all together. He's the guy who made the video, which our folks can still watch. Very good 12-minute video, I think, with some great interviews and scene setting in it, and very complements the text perfectly. And but yeah, there were so many things that happened over the course of that year, you know, pulling this together, the different interviews, talking to people. That was quite an experience. It's not really like anything else I've ever done, you know, since I've been in this field. I mean, a lot of folks will probably be familiar with a lot of the World War II interviews I've done, which I'm very proud of. And I guess I've talked about some of the parallels and how some of that prepared me for this. I think sitting down and talking to veterans who are, you know, 70, 75 years removed from having experienced a very traumatic time in their lives, having lost people close to them, often in very violent circumstances. I think having interviewed folks like that and sat with them while they recalled these things actually helped me with this series, because there's a sense in which it's very similar. You're asking people to recall something, in this case, very traumatic, that they experienced 40 years ago. Again, you know, a lengthy period of time, but which for them, for the people, is still very fresh. I mean, it's still much of it still so very real. And the same thing was true with the World War II vets. And but yeah, it was we were all very pleased with how it all came together. The feedback was tremendous.
It was amazing. Literally the number one thing on our website for months and months, still will spike up every once in a while, you know, once a year.
Which speaks to the interest that is still out there in this case.
Well, I will say that it speaks to the depth. I think you wrote this with a depth that is not available anywhere else, Tim. I think that you were able not only to do your reporting, but you were able to dive into our archive. I mean, you know, we've got millions and millions of stories in our archive that goes back 116 years. That what separates us from so many other people. I'm glad we have that archive.
That's an incredible resource, and not just the stories. I found sources through doing that. I mean, I got with Doug Hicks, who did a lot of he did a lot of the original reporting, and we interviewed him for the series. But also, it was in that I found a guy named Mike Wheat, who ended up being one of the most critical interviews in the series. And it was because I found his name in our archives. But he was a reporter at the time with a weekly paper in Pryor. It no longer exists now. It's called the Pryor Jeffersonian, but he had some access in this case, which was just incredible. I mean, he was, we get too far off in the weeds, but he was actually on the scene that day. He was allowed past the police tape.
Oh, wow.
And because at that time they didn't have, and I think it's this way in you know, more rural counties, they would call on a member of the local paper to come and shoot crime scene photos for them. Well, he got the call that morning, you know, Mike Wheat with the local weekly. And so he was able to talk about that. He was able to put us in his shoes on the scene, looking at these, you know, these little girls. And he described that. And I just remember Mike's hands shaking as he talked. He got teary-eyed. I mean, we're 40 years removed from this, and clearly in his mind, it's like it's yesterday.
Yep.
And the only reason I knew about Mike was because I found his name, just a reference in one of the stories in our archives from years and years ago. I called him up, found him, you know, in the phone book, called him up, and he said, you know, no one's ever asked me about that. No one has ever called and asked me to tell that story. He said, yeah, I'll help you out. You know, he said, I've been in your shoes, you know, we're journalists. But and incidentally, Mike is one of the guys they interviewed for the ABC series. So if you watch that, you'll get a chance to see him telling the story again. But again, it's because, I mean, it all goes back to, you know, the archival work. And, you know, otherwise, who knows, Mike might not have ever told his story.
Well, it goes back to your reporting. It goes back to your professionalism as someone who, one of the things that we do, Tim, is that we get to the bottom of stuff. We get to keep looking. We get to search. We get to research. And as I said, your series, I think there's a reason why, if anyone's considered an expert on this, it's you. And again, we're really lucky here at the Tulsa World. This is what separates us. I mean, you can talk about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and guess what? Randy Crable is mentioned as one of the people, again, a reporter who has done all that work, written a book about the race massacre. And he was in every documentary there was when that was happening for the 100th anniversary last year. Not surprised when we got the call up from ABC to wanting to include you in this and work with them to make this happen. As I said, this series will be coming as documentary series is going to be coming out on Hulu here pretty soon. We'll, of course, it's into May. Is that right now, Tim?
We're looking at, I think what we've been told, May 24th is the target date for the release on Hulu. I think, probably if folks want to follow us, I mean, we'll probably be reporting on that.
Absolutely. We'll report that. And also, we're going to put back out there your series online at tulsaworld.com. We'll also put back out the podcast series so people can listen to it on Apple, Spotify, Google, all those things. We'll put that back out there as well. And because again, if you don't know this story, I say this a lot about what we do. If you don't know this story, you need to read it. And because again, you went to a depth that had never been done before, a narrative, just like you do. You mentioned your World War II series where you profiled the heroes in our community for years now. We put a book together with a lot of those in it. And Tim, you write. I said you're one of the best writers we got. It's not even. We are so lucky here to have people with your veteran experience, with your talent. And just like you mentioned, you sit down and let them interview you. That goes to who you are and why you're different than so many others. So, Tim, thank you for going back in time with me on this. Again, we'll be talking about this documentary series when it comes out. And again, this is what we do here. We do important work. And again, for those families and for our community, they need to know the stories of what really happened. And I think that's what you did in your series, what you did in the podcast. And I think what's this series from ABC is going to do as well. When we know what really happened and we get closer to the truth, we might actually find the truth. So really appreciate it.
Ever have been. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. We will, again, follow up on the description of this podcast. We'll put the link to that video. He talked about the John Clinton put together with Mike Simons and Jesse, and where you can watch that. Kind of a mini documentary, if you will. That's one of the best things we've ever done, along with the link to the series, a link to the latest story that has the DNA evidence, the news of that. And then, of course, we'll let you know when the document series comes out. Tim, thank you very much for your time. Again, this is the Newsroom Podcast. This is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify, where I, as the editor of the Tulsa World, a very, very lucky guy, get a chance to talk to people like Tim and find the stories behind the stories. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you next episode.
Thank you.